from the studio that almost gave you a novel, but instead gave you Those Who Know About Picthos, Shadows of the Water Tower, and other timeless classics which can't be named. Waves of Obsession Studio proudly presents audio presentation. Enjoy. Hissing Guts of the Nikanor, Chapter 1. Colt sat cross-legged on the living room floor. The snapped arm of a cleaning robot lay beneath a dented wall. Half-filled food containers lined the coffee table, and mountains of dirty clothes appeared to have rained from the ceiling. His girlfriend Amber sat to his left, Gabe directly in front with Ron to his right. Amber placed the box in their center and slowly opened the lid with a satisfying grin. "You guys won't believe what I got this time," Amber said. "Some more weak-ass muscle relaxers," Gabe barked. "Yeah, Amber, you said the same thing last week. You won't believe this, you guys," Ron said. "Well, fine. I'll just have to keep it all to myself," Amber said, complimented with a middle finger. Ron held his hands up. "Whoa, let's not get crazy here. You know how I feel about you." Colt's punch to Ron's arm smacked louder than expected. "Dude, that shit hurts. Still got a bruise from the other day. You gotta stop that shit, or I'm not gonna let you come over anymore." Colt surveyed the room, raised an eyebrow, and said, "You know what? I might take you up on that offer." "You two need a room. Gabe and I can give you some privacy," Amber said, then removed 4 cones from the box, screwed on 4 tubes, and reached into her purse. She set a white plastic container next to the box and cut the holographic seals. She brushed her finger across the raised logo for Drake Pharmaceutical. Inside the case was a glass cylinder with a metal nozzle at one end. She lifted one above eyesight, light catching the glittering dark fluid held within. The glass had a long number etched along its circumference. "This doesn't look like the others," Colt said. "Got a good eye, baby. This is right out of R&D. Had to pull a little magic to snatch this one." "I'm afraid to even ask what a little magic means," Colt said. In his mind, he was thinking, "Damn it, I hope she didn't really pull some magic." "Shut up, Colt. I would never actually do anything with Dr. Freeman. I just happened to have a few buttons opened on my shirt and sat in his lap while he told me all about his revolutionary work. He said that this is going to change the world. Then he showed me the case. He went on and on. Peptide this, pheromone that, something about neural integration," Amber said. "So what does it do?" Gabe asked. "I'm not quite sure. I just know that Dr. Freeman's group works in level 10. Jimmy, the guy I normally get stuff from, mentioned one day that he wished he could get his hands on some of Dr. Freeman's goods. When I asked Jimmy why, he just said that level 10 is where the real shit's going down," Amber said. "So, what, he just handed the case over?" said Ron. "No, dumbass. You know, I just happened to clean it up during my rounds," Amber said, with fluttering eyes. "Amber, don't you think they'll notice that they're missing a case of this stuff? Drake owns this entire planet. We all just live here to appease some corporate legislature. Outside of water, Drake's drugs are the only exports that fuel our economy," Holt said, and rubbed his hand across his face. He laughed, then said, "Plug it in, this is going to be epic." Amber inserted all 4 cones into the injection pump. Everyone grabbed their hose and screwed it into their nodes fused just below the wrist. She then took the cylinder, pressed, and twist-locked it into the center of the pump. A small light turned red, then blue, and she pressed the button. Holt watched as the dark, shimmering fluid slowly siphoned up the hose and then into his node. First was always a tingle through the forearm, then the bicep, but now there was a burn. His hand instinctively clutched his rib cage. It burned bad. He heard the pop of the hose auto-injecting after the injection was complete. The pop rang deep in his ears. His head violently jerked 2 times. Colt glanced over at Amber. Her eyes were no longer blue, just barely white with black globes. Gabe had rivers of sweat pouring down his forehead. Ron had buckled over and lay headfirst on the pump base. Colt's head jerked another time, then all the muscles in his back cinched all at once. He lay on his back, stiff as a board, unable to move. He could not think over the grueling pain. his jaw muscles locked up, teeth pressing together like hydraulic jacks, and thought they may shatter. Holt's nose twitched as a sour odor hit him, bile oozing from his nostrils. He coughed and rolled to his side, then crawled onto all fours and started to dry heave. Once the heaving subsided, he took a deep breath and gagged again. The stench of the room was thick and filmy. Holt's face scrunched. He stood, dizziness challenging his footing. Holt looked down to find Amber, Gabe, and Ron motionless on the floor. Holt kneeled and grabbed Amber by an icy shoulder to flip her over on her back. Pink foam spewed from her mouth and nose. He did not need to check if she was alive. Holt stood rapidly, stomach wrenched, and fell backwards. He crashed into the coffee table piled with moldy, rancid food that splashed everywhere. Holt, drenched in a cesspool of filth, could not move, could not puke. The room faded into black. Holt's nose twitched as a sour odor hit him. However, this time it was not bile, but the ammonia salts of the paramedic. He couldn't make out the shapes clearly. Shadows walked around him, some kneeling by the others grabbing him up to a gurney. Holt was not sure how long he had been lying in the bed, or where the bed was. His back ached and his eyes felt puffy. He reached to scratch his face only to realize that his arm was cuffed to the bed. Droning beeps from the various machines filled the room. Holt sank into the bed, closed his eyes again, and just as he could feel sleep grab him, a man's voice boomed. "Mr. Carter, I need to ask you some questions." Holt shook his head back and forth a couple of times to fight the drowsiness. "Mr. Carter, I need your absolute attention," the man said with a stone-cold glare. Holt nodded. "The first thing you need to realize is that you are now legally considered intellectual property of Drake Pharmaceutical. This means that you inherently have all antitrust and non-disclosure requirements legally bound to our property. You understand? Drake owns me, and I keep my mouth shut. I want my lawyer. Where are the cops? I want to speak with them first," Colt said. "We have already spoken with your family lawyer, your parents, and the police. The moment you decided to inject our nanotechnology into your system, you were subjugated to the zero-tolerance Class Z nanotechnology laws. Your federal sentence will begin in 2 days," the man said, then swiped at his tablet. "It appears that you have the minimum zero-tolerance sentence of 4 years. Did you just say I'm going to prison for 4 years? Well, the zero-tolerance laws surrounding Class Z violations are very clear and harsh. Even the doctor responsible for letting these drugs get stolen will be sentenced," the man said. Holt started to rub small circles around his temples and bite his fingernails. As he rocked back and forth, he looked back into his memory of the events. "Did Ron and Gabe make it? I mean, are they alive?" Colt asked. "Colt, you were the only survivor. In fact, it's astonishing that you have survived. We plan to gain valuable information from you. We've already installed a full-spectrum analytics implant to continuously monitor your system. We don't require any special diets, exercise plans, or any additional change in behavior. Any additional change in behavior. You will just move forward in life, act as if this never happened, with the exception to your prison sentence and a felony record." Holt noticed the small faint red light under his skin just below his node. He started to complain, started to yell out insanely, but then just caved in. The man stood and walked out of the hospital room. Holt lay still for quite some time and simply drifted back to sleep. Chapter 2. 4 years later. Holt was physically larger. Prison had provided that missing time and focus required to lift weights and exercise every day. He sat in the window of his childhood room, back at his parents' home. All as it should be, neighbors cutting grass, trimming bushes, children playing catch, and a young woman jogging caught Colt's eyes bouncing with perfect time. A knock at the door disrupted his thoughts. "Colt, can you come downstairs for a moment?" his mother said. Colt acknowledged, grabbed his tablet, earbuds, and walked downstairs. He was expecting to sit at the table and be given a list of chores to complete. He placed one earbud in and was about to press play. "Son, can you take those out for a moment?" said Colt. Holt paused, glanced at his mother, then set the tablet on the table. Thank you, son. Your mother and I have been more than willing, more than accepting of this difficult situation you've arrived in. We want to. Want to what? Colt interrupted. Colt, have some respect, his mother snapped. Colt glanced at her and relaxed into the chair. Son, we need to talk about your future, about a job. Ha ha. There's no way I'm going to work for you, Colt said, arms crossed. No, son, not for me. You're a felon, and my company can't risk the tarnished reputation that situation would cause. So now I'm a situation? Damn it, Colt, you just shut up for 1 minute and let someone talk. You are not some kind of innocent victim here. Colt's mom glared at his father. He held his hands up. No, I won't stop. This little ungrateful asshole has treated me like shit for too long. Has treated you like shit. Colt started to reply, but his father interrupted. Stop. You have two choices. One, find a job and living arrangements in 2 weeks, or take the job that I have set up for you that happens to come with room and board. Oh, great. I have two choices. Sounds just like what Drake Pharmaceutical told me, Colt shouted. Colt's father took a deep breath, then looked directly into Colt's eyes. Son, I know that you're hurting. I know that you loved her. I know that the only way you can heal is to move forward. Colt pressed the corners of his mouth down, scrunched his nose, and tightened his jaw. Look, son, I'm not expecting everything to go back to normal. I honestly just want to give you a chance to get back on your feet. Colt pressed his hand over his forehead. So what is this second option? A friend of mine does business with a company called Forbidden Ground. They are currently looking for guides to run their expeditions. Expeditions? Where, exactly? Colt said. Well, Colt, I'm not exactly sure. From what I know, they specialize in hunting exotic creatures for off-worlders. Their prize to fame is something called the Nikanor. Isn't the Nikanor a myth? I've heard all kinds of stories about it since I was a boy. Well, I don't know what is fact or fiction. Only that a job is open and you meet all the minimum requirements, Colt's father said. Colt was about to ask another question, then paused. Looked his father in the eye, smiled a little, and walked back up to his room. 2 weeks later, Colt arrives at the front gate of Forbidden Grounds. Colt stepped out of the auto car, the bright sun blazing. For a moment, he thought about turning around, thought about doing his own thing, and then reality crushed his soul. Colt clutched the straps of his backpack and walked over to the main building. A mixed bag of company was sitting under a pavilion behind the right-hand corner of the building. A tall blonde caught his eye, but he was startled by a deep voice. You're about to step in some dog shit. Colt paused mid-step, just barely avoiding the large pile. Thanks? Colt said, glancing back at the pavilion. Nobody even realized he existed. You must be Colt. Hell, you might as well be Troy. You look just like him, the grizzled old man said. You must be my father's friend, Colt said with an exaggerated eye roll. Son, you better not roll your eyes at me again, or I'm going to pop you in the jaw and make that look permanent, understand? The man said with a step forward. Colt straightened up, then took a step back and nodded. Good, and yes. Troy's been a friend of mine since I was knee-high. We went to school together and then served together. How is that even possible? You're old, and what do you mean served together? Boy, I am this close, Paul said with his right fist balled up. I'm going to calm down now. I forget how stupid your generation is. I'm as old as your father. I'm confused. You're like 160 years old, Colt said very seriously. Paul sighed and shook his head. No, I'm actually younger than your father. I'm only 76. The big difference is that I refuse the nanoweb. Colt stared back, blank expression upon his face. Paul waved a bare fist in the air and chuckled. Let's go inside and talk. We have some life insurance papers to sign. Paul gestured for Colt to sit at the table. He vigorously tapped the screen of a tablet, laid it on the table, then went to the gel fridge and plucked out a beer. Read this. Don't skim over it. Don't speed read it. Actually spend the few minutes it will take to read, Paul said. Colt read the document as Paul drank a handful of beers, patiently waiting for him to sign his life away. Paul stood, walked to the door, and said, Meet me outside when you're done and bring a beer with you. Holt stepped outside, shielding his eyes as he groped for his shades. Paul laughed from the two-seater buggy. Two-seater buggy. It's a lot brighter out here than it is in the city. Hell, we're only 20 miles from the edge of Zone 5. Which direction is the edge? Colt said. Paul licked his finger and pointed it up. Follow the wind. Always remember, walking into the wind is like walking through the gates of hell. If you make it to Zone 5 going into 6, you will burst into flames. Holt never really put much thought into the different zones other than thinking that only an idiot would want to explore them. He hopped into the buggy, and they drove around the grounds. After completing the loop, they parked in front of the third house adjacent to the main parking lot. Paul went up to the door and knocked. A short, stocky man opened the door. What's up, Paul? Phil, this is the kid I told you about last week. Holt, this is Phil, your new roommate. If you have any problems, keep it to yourself. I've got too much shit to worry about. Holt, make sure that you make it to training facility on time in the morning. The house had a small living room crammed together with the kitchen, with two doors on the right wall. Phil opened the left door and scuttled around to pick up some random boxes. You're going to have to pick up the rest of the room if you want a place to sleep. This is all that I need from here. You may also want to go down to the storage shed and see if they have an extra blanket to cover the window. The blackout shades are broken, and it gets bright during the night. No locks on the door, so you're free to come and go, Phil said. Cool. Which way to the shed? Phil thumbed towards the right, back towards the office. Holt threw his bag in the room and headed out the door towards the shed. As he walked down the road, he noticed the group back by the pavilion before. As he glanced over, he made eye contact with the big guy leaning against the pillar. The man stared him down, almost looked through him. Holt wasn't in the mood for any trouble this early in his stay, so he continued to the shed. As he approached the shed, he heard a scraping noise emanating from within. He paused and focused his hearing. Nothing more happened. He clutched the door handle and swung it open. Inside was a bed, a skinny young man rapidly plowing a woman twice his size, doggy style. They didn't even slow down, however, both just yelled, "Shut the door!" Holt immediately slammed the door and walked away. This time, he crossed the pavilion. The entire crew of friends were rolling in belly-deep laughter, one of them almost to the point of gagging. Holt wanted to get pissed off, but he knew it was hilarious. However, he just wanted to go back to his room and go to sleep. When he walked back into the house, Phil looked up from his game controller and said, "How fast was he going? 100, 200 pounds per second?" Holt smirked and went into his room, slamming the door behind him. Phil yelled, "I had to do it to you. It's basically a rite of passage." Holt sat down on the bed and surveyed the small room. Light spewed into the room through the busted shade. He looked at the clock, 11:30 p.m. This was going to be an issue. The room was almost empty except for a handful of boxes. He grabbed one and noticed that it was full of pamphlets. Holt pulled one out for inspection. Alderberry Winery, a new kind of wine for a new kind of planet. Inside was a photo of this place, however, with a different sign up. There was a picture of the pavilion with a bunch of people sitting around, all cheering with a glass of dark liquid, with the caption above, "The wine that alters time and the mind." Holt dumped the box out into the corner and flattened it out, then started to smash it into the window shade. The room darkened almost completely. Now only a small amount of fiber globe light glowed from the ceiling port. Holt woke to the sound of someone banging on the door. Holt yelled, "What? What do you want?" "You're going to be late. Training starts at 6:30, Phil said. Holt jumped out of the bed as he remembered some of the details that the old man, or not so old man, had told him. He was not fully awake, but managed to get out the door and started to drag himself down the road to the small building on the left. As he approached the building, he could now see the front door with a large sign above that simply said "Hell" in bold red letters. Holt opened the door, walked into an open room where four familiar faces stood in a line to his left. A large man stood on a small balcony in front, while two other people stood to his right, each behind a line on the floor. "Get in the line with the others," the man on the balcony said. Holt walked over to his right and stood next to a young woman, close to his age. Holt kept his eyes down, not wanting to make eye contact with the other four whom he had seen from the pavilion yesterday. He took a quick glance to notice a tall blonde staring intently. While not sure if it was him specifically, he could see that she was inspecting him and the others. Intense light poured from the door opening, causing Colt to shield his eyes. A wide, smiley man walked in. "Hello, everyone," he said as he waved to them all. He looked at the man on the balcony and said, "You must be Mr. Sharp. Hi, I'm Danny Mopslow. I'm so excited to be here." The man on the balcony did not flinch, expression unmoved, arms locked behind his back. As the silence grew, he swept his glare across the room, staring at each person one by one until he finished with Danny and said, "Stand over there behind the line." Danny gulped hard and quickly found his place next. The man from the balcony walked down to the floor with the others and stood in between the two groups of four, turned slightly to the new group, and said, "You may call me Master Trainer Sharp, which is the only title that will be acceptable. For those unfortunate to not have this information, I apologize with words only and sentence punishment for disobedience." He glared at Danny Mopslow and said, "Disobedience is not free in my training facility, because we train to save lives, including your life, your squad mates, and the patrons that we serve." He pulled out a small pistol-shaped object, pointed it at Danny, and pulled the trigger. A small flash erupted from the barrel, and Danny buckled over, convulsing on the ground. Colt stiffened up, voice screaming within him to bend over and help this man, to do something, and at the same time another voice, a deeper voice, telling him to mind his place to stay out of trouble. It was a tall blonde that moved first, then the other three from her group to run over. Their movement was mechanical, with orchestrated precision. One of them grabbed his neck, the others his ankles. One more went into a side door and returned with a small bag. The last one was removing the man's shirt. He pulled out a small medical device and hooked it to his chest. He analyzed the details and removed a small glass tube. The tall blonde grabbed his arm and braced it between her arm and chest, securing his arm. She found his nano node and twist-locked the glass tube, injecting the contents within Danny. He instantly quit convulsing. His breath returned to a normal pace. Within a few moments, he popped his eyes open. They helped him to his feet, returned him to his place in the line, and all lined back into place. Holt was shaking ever so slightly. He glanced at the woman to his left, and she appeared to be crying. His mind began to swell with horrific thoughts, ideas, and solutions to his apparent danger. He could feel sweat forming in his palm and across his forehead. His mania was interrupted by Master Trainer Sharp. "Disobedience is zero tolerance, even to rules you do not know exist. I do not enjoy invoking punishment. In fact, it keeps me awake at night. However, I know that it is critical that we all understand its purpose, and in time will know its reasons. You four will be training for the next 6 weeks to become members of the Forbidden Grounds Squadron Guide." Sharp looked them each in the eyes, and then each of his Squadron Guide members. "I would love to say that you all have an opportunity to leave now, but I'm not, because I know that you are all here for the same reason, and it's the same reason that drove all of us here. This is nobody's first choice in career moves. If it is, then that means you're crazy, and we don't want you here. You will be judged by performance, by peers, and by me. Let's go." Each of the guides went to stand next to them, the tall blonde inches away from Colt's shoulder. He had to suppress a smile. Master Trainer Sharp motioned for attention, and the room went quiet. "Critical rule. We always work in pairs. You've been assigned a Squadron Guide member during your training session. They will be referred to you as your SGL. And as a Squadron Guide leader, they have been in the field and conducted hundreds of tours for our patrons. They command respect in every aspect. If they say you are done, then you are, and you will never return here. We will be lucky if even one of you make the cut. A sad but true reality." Master Trainer Sharp disappeared into a room with a countdown clock above it, while each of the pairs went into separate rooms. The tall blonde looked at Colt and motioned to follow, and he did. The room was larger than expected, white textured walls with thick-smelling air of chemicals. Colt immediately held his nose. "You get used to the smell. It's just H2S. You might cough for a while, but it's completely safe. They use it in the milling process and back to make some of the other not-so-safe chemicals, the blonde said with a charming smile. I am afraid to ask what you mean by completely safe. Anyway, my name is Colt. What's your name? You should be afraid, because we don't call it hell for nothing. You can call me Jewel when you graduate, if you graduate. For now, we must find you a suit and a gun. Jewel opened a small panel on the wall and pressed some buttons. The adjacent wall opened, displaying a large array of guns. The other wall opened to contain suits, helmets, chest plates, leg armor, gloves, backpacks, and other unknown devices. She pressed one more command in, and another section opened, revealing a tidy, full suit of armor and a rifle with a sign reading Jewel inscribed above. We need to find you a suit, and if you hurry, I might let you watch me suit up. Colt's eyes jolted to meet her and smiled. What do I need to do? Colt said. Take off your clothes and place your feet on the two circles, Jewel said. Colt froze, processing what she just said. All of my clothes? Yes. The suit has bio-expanding gel within that must adhere to your skin. Don't worry, I'll measure you so that you don't have to try on all these things. Jewel said. Colt slowly took off all his clothes, and as he walked up to the two circles, he instinctively covered himself. Jewel walked up behind him and whispered in his ear, Hold your arms out straight. Close your eyes. She activated the scanning laser green light sweeping across Colt's body. You can put your arms down now. He did. She went to the wall and returned with a pair of boots. She unlatched the back section and they separated. She walked up to Colt, staring into his eyes. She slowly kneeled to the ground. Colt tensed. He grabbed his foot, forcefully shoved it into the boot section. Old gel, shocking. She clamped the back section and locked it closed. Damn, I think it's a perfect fit, Jewel said, blue eyes staring up at Colt's placid face. She quickly stood, walked over around his back and said, Sorry, take a step. Tell me how it feels. Colt breathed deep and took a step. Feels fine, Colt said. Good, that's great. Believe it or not, you just saved the company a ton of money in printing costs. We custom print suits for all the patrons because it's part of the experience. This is why we have so many to choose from. The boots seem to be the one piece that, if it's not perfect, we have to custom print for the squadron guides, because the seals won't bond to the leg joints. We don't want you to break a seal out there and boil inside the suit. Colt's eyes flipped at her when she said boil. Jewel went back to the panel, entered a series of commands, and the wall glowed with an array of suit pieces. She grabbed the torso section down, walked behind him, and said, Arms out one more time. After this one, you can finish on your own. The icy gel grabbed his attention. Once the seal locked, he went to the wall to collect the other pieces. He put them on slowly, interlocking the joints. As he struggled with the forearm, he turned to Jewel and said, I can't seem to get this forearm plate to lock. What am I... His voice escaped him as he captured a glance at her naked body. What am I doing wrong? She locked eyes with him and walked over, grabbed his gloved hand, then the forearm plate, lifted it at an angle and said, like this. You have to get this socket to line up and snap it down at an angle. Colt did everything in his power not to stare, and said, You make it look so simple, she smiled. Colt walked back over to the locker and continued to put on her suit with a graceful efficiency that Colt had not thought possible. Colt struggled a little bit more, but managed to get all the pieces together, holding the helmet to his side. Jewel handed him a gun, then grabbed his helmet, tapped the door button, and nodded for Colt to follow. They were the second group to make it back out to the training floor. The third group arrived just a few minutes later. We were all waiting for Danny. Colt watched as the countdown clock above the door went to 0. Master Trainer Sharp emerged. A few seconds later, the last remaining pair sprinted to the floor. The SGL of that pair looked at the clock and immediately stepped forward. Danny followed. Mr. Sharp stepped forward and said, Well, holy shit, this is a first. Back-to-back offenses of disobedience? Jerry, what is the punishment for suit-up failure? Jerry's eyes widened and in a low voice said, Suit failure simulation in the hot box, sir. Mr. Sharp did not say a word. The other SGLs led their pairs over to a door across the room, and they all entered. Inside the small room was a series of doors, one of them glass, with a large glass window making it look like an animal cage. Jerry keyed in some commands into the small panel outside the door. Bright red light blinked. A large plume of smoke billowed from the ceiling of the small room. The readout had many gauges and various charts buzzing across the screen. Jerry held his wrist node over the panel and let it sink. Then Danny followed. The screen had two suits detailing every individual piece, their names tagged above. Mr. Sharp did a small hand gesture, and all the SGLs put on their helmets, their pairs following the lead. Danny, I need you to listen very closely, and most important, to stay calm and don't panic, Jerry said into the helmet comm system. Why would I panic? I'm fine, great even. I try to make the best out of every situation, Danny said. You must follow my lead. When you hear the alarm in your suit, I need you to lay down on the floor and I will fix your suit first. Then I will need you to help me hold my legs straight while I fix my suit, Jerry said. The door opened and walked into the airlock. The light changed over to green. They walked into the room. Once inside, Mr. Sharp went over to the panel, pushed a button, and the right leg of each suit on the panel went red. The alarm went off in Danny's suit. He didn't lie down. Help, help, it burns, Danny screamed. He started to flail about the room, knocking Jerry over. A new red light lit up on the panel over Jerry's arm. Danny, lay down, please, just lay down, Jerry said. Danny went hysterical. He ran full speed and slammed into the large glass window. His helmet made a large crack. Red blood smattered down the humid glass. Mr. Sharp pressed the override button, and the room instantly cleared. The SGLs ran into the room. In the comm, Jules said, "Let's go. We need everyone." Colt ran into the room. The SGLs went to Danny's unmoving body, grabbed his legs and shoulders, dragging him out of the room. Colt went over to Jerry. Jill, the crying girl from before, went on his other side. They both lifted him up and got him out of the room. After they set Jerry down, they both turned to see Danny laid out on the floor with his helmet off, his face a texture of red melted wax dripping into the joints of the suit. Colt had thought for sure that he was dead. Suddenly he coughed up a large chunk of blood. A moment later, a medical team rushed to pick up the mess, while Mr. Sharp did another hand gesture, and the remaining SGLs walked back out to the main room. Their little puppies followed. We must train for everything. I realize that this training may seem to be too intense. However, had that happened out there, we would have had fatality. Jerry should have subdued Danny and prevented him from causing undue harm, but instead he fell prey to panic. Mental fortitude is the skill that will keep you, your team, and the patrons alive. Mr. Sharp said, then activated a large smart wall and swiped a huge map that filled the wall. He quickly pinched the screen, removing the icy wastelands on the left side of the map. He moved the map over the only major city on the planet, and zoomed in. The screen suddenly showed colored zones. He zoomed once more, showing zones 4, 5, and 6 with a small dot in zone 4. We must use that mental fortitude to know every aspect of the terrain that we explore. I realize that many of you have never left the comforts of the city. While the unchanging 70-degree weather is nice, it's not forbidden. We challenge normal. We push the boundaries, and we allow others to help explore that deep desire within them to do what most people call foolish. Andy, come up here and give everyone some of your knowledge. Jules shifted in her spot and said, Master Trainer Sharp, may I prepare the obstacle course? Mr. Sharp nodded, and Jewel whispered into Colt's ear as she got up, Have fun. This may be worse than the hot box. Andy was a medium build with dark brown skin, his eyes wide and sunk into deep sockets. He stood while the others sat on the floor in front of the wall. Yes, thank you, sir, Master Trainer Sharp. I deeply love to share the great knowledge of terrain learnings. As we can see from this illuminated wall, this dot is a representation of our location settling within temperature zone 4. During our expeditions, we will travel across 4 various trail allotments in search of primary target of hunting the elusive Nikanor beast. Due to the rarity of the Nikanor sightings, we have 10 secondary targets, all of whom are carnivorous creatures worthy of self-defense. Andy said, then continued for the next hour to monotonously drone about every single trail in hyper-focused detail. He covered all the rock formations, soil composition, flora and fauna by common and scientific names. Holt found that he was struggling to keep his eyes open. He noticed that Jill next to him was doing the same nod. He then had a word interrupt in his mind: disobedience. He flipped his eyes open and nudged Jill with his elbow, mouthed the word, and she also straightened up, as neither of them wanted to even guess what is right or wrong. At the hour 2 mark, Andy changed the wall to show a video angled from a tall tree. A full group of SGLs and patrons are walking along the ridge of a trail named Osage. When the group nears the center of the screen, one of the SGLs makes a hold sign with their arm. The group starts to splinter into smaller groups. One of the patrons points to the valley on the far side of the screen. They raise their guns. Another patron points in the opposite direction. One of the groups walks off the trail towards the camera. Something in the brush causes them to raise their guns. A large creature bursts from the brush directly behind them, leaping on top of one of the patrons. The creature was larger than a man, long, lean cat-like body, smooth and moist, bluish-purple skin with 6 stocky, muscular legs. Large claws slashed the patron's suit, leaving visible scratches. The patron thrashed to find his dropped gun. The SGL grabbed a knife and jammed it into the creature's skull, killing it instantly. The other patron fired his weapon at another charging creature. It fell into the ground just behind the SGL. A few seconds later, the other group fired 16 more shots, killing 3 other creatures. The entire team regrouped and scanned the area. The SGL gave a clear sign, and they all started celebrating. Andy continued to show them videos of encounters with all 10 of the secondary creatures. Holt was on edge from the intensity of the videos, each one better than the last, some of which felt like a scene from a movie. Jill raised her hand. Andy nodded for her to speak. Did you show the video for the Nikanor, or did I just miss it? No, your observation serves you, ma'am. All these videos are taken from permanent field installations within Zone 5 and 6. We have not been successful with cameras in other zones because the environment destroys them over time. The Nikanor has only been spotted in Zone 6/7. We do have some POV footage, however, you will not see that until week 5, when you focus your training for full force encounters with the Nikanor. Andy said. Andy changed the wall once more and continued for another 2 hours, talking about the weather, light spectrum, and the suit's capabilities and limitations. The 3 recruits were ripped from their tunnel of boredom when Master Trainer Sharp told them it was break time. Holt, Jill, and the other girl got up and went over to a small table. Jill asked the other girl what her name was. She said Tammy. Tammy leaned over the table and said, what the fuck did we get into? I'm pretty sure that Danny dude is dead. Must be dead. His face is melting off his skull. He has to be alive. They wouldn't make the training that dangerous, Jill said. I wouldn't be so sure about that. Did you read the disclosure paperwork? Holt said. Both the girls scrunched their faces and shook their heads no. They looked at him like he was stupid for even suggesting that they would have read that. Holt sighed, pointed at the far wall, and said, did you not notice the entire wall of helmets with the sign reading Fallen Heroes? Both the girls looked in unison. That can't be right. There's like 100 helmets on that wall, Jill said. More like 158. And I bet you that is only for SGLs, Holt said. Tammy rubbed her hand across her forehead, elbows driven into the table. Holt was dissecting the situation, calculating how long these two girls would make it. His short stay in prison taught him a permanent lesson in patience, as he picked at the skin just above the glowing light of the analyzer installed by Drake Pharmaceuticals so long ago, his personal time machine of tormenting memories. Master Trainer Sharp called for the end of the break, and they returned to the main floor. It's time to start physical training at the obstacle course. They walked to the rear of the building to find a military-style course. Each of the SGLs explained the basics and set the course with an hour clock. Colt went first and was doing great until the last moment. Colt stood in the circle at the end, waiting for instructions. He looked at Colt and she gave the hold sign. In the comms, she said, "You have to learn how to fall. It's very important that no matter which way you are falling, that you land chest plate down. Do you understand?" Colt nodded, then was lifted off his feet from a blow to the face and smashed into the floor back first. Colt lay motionless for a second, turned and stood up. Jewel grabbed his back and started to inspect the canisters. Looks like just one nozzle is slightly bent. I'm surprised that's all the damage. Haven't seen someone hit that hard in a while, Bill said. I'm not sure what happened. I didn't see anything hit me, Colt said. You got knocked out by a sonic blast. When you stand in that circle, it can hit you from any direction. The training won't work if you see it coming. You must realize that even a small fall on your back can kill you out there. Don't worry, we do this training every day, even after you become a squadron guide, Jewel said. They continued training for a few hours more, and closed out the night with a shared dinner in hell. Colt stumbled back to his room, not from the wine, but the sheer pain of the training. When he walked in, Phil said, "Damn, son, heard you guys had some fun today. You need to get some rest. I'll make sure that you're up in the morning." Colt sort of smiled and fell into his bed, not even bothering to shut the door. Phil was pounding on the door and yelling again. Colt tossed back and forth a bit, then jolted up, feeling like it had only been 20 minutes ago that he fell asleep. The perpetual sun filled the empty husk of Colt's body as he dragged himself back to hell. When he walked in, the SGLs were already suited up. Colt took the hint and rushed in to suit up. This suit up was less awkward, and when he missed the show from Jewel. He was eager to get out there for fear of any risk of disobedience. The training was straightforward for the next 4 weeks. Obstacle course, smack in the face, fall, shoot guns, and listen to Andy drone. They occasionally broke the cycle with a break, or a meal, or an inspiring speech by Master Trainer Sharp. On the first day of the 5th week, Phil stopped Colt as he walked out the door and said, "You gotta put your A game on today. You will be tested. Can't say much, but I wish you luck and be safe." Colt walked a little bit slower to hell that day, his mind a little racy. Everything seemed normal until it was time to sit down with Andy for today's lecture of fun. Instead of Andy, Master Trainer Sharp led everyone to a back room. None of the recruits had been in yet. The room wasn't large, dark walls with a prominent hollow statue in the corner of a different creature that none of them had seen. The hollow wasn't complete either. The lower sections were blurred, along with parts of the midsection, towered almost to the ceiling. Colt stared at the creature's large triangular head, arms longer than Colt's entire body with 4 dagger-sharp claws. This is the best representation of the Nikanor that we have. This was constructed from 20 POV cameras and this, Mr. Sharp said as he opened the lid of a large case on the wall. "This is the arm of the monster, shot off the bastard by yours truly. I consider it more of a trade," he said, holding his hand for all to see. Colt just now realized that it was a prosthetic limb. "I want you all to take this very seriously. It could mean the difference between life, death, and the chance to mount the head of that monster in the trophy room. This creature is damn smart and ruthless. We have sent 2 hunting parties out every month for the last 15 years, and have managed to have 37 encounters, resulting in 26 deaths and 11 major injuries. mine being the first. Master Trainer Sharp motioned for his SGLs to start. Jewel took Colt over to the side door, and they went inside. That tingling smell hit Colt's nose. Jewel grabbed Colt's wrist, pressed the latch, and popped off his glove, exposing his nano node. She grabbed a small glass tube. Colt stiffened when she spotted it. As she pushed back his forearm plate some, she noticed the faint, glowing red light under his skin and rubbed it and said, "What the hell is that?" Colt did not answer. He just stared at Jewel, and she said, "No, seriously, what is that? I can't give you this. You have a pacer or something. Honestly, you'll be out." Colt swallowed hard. "It's a monitor. Part of my punishment." Jewel stared, waiting for more details. "Look, it's like Master Trainer Sharp said. I'm here for a reason, and it's not because I'm crazy. I get it. I won't push anymore. I just want to make sure it wasn't something different. He had a guy a few years ago with a digital serotonin reuptake inhibitor wired into his nano node, and this about killed him. Told the objective is simple. You must listen for instruction. Keep calm and remember that this is training." Jewel said as she twist-locked the glass tube Colt's wrist. Liquid rushed into his system. Colt went into the room, the heavy door latched behind him. Within a few seconds, a flushing sensation flowed over his head and around his neck. His breath grew heavy, and the light in the corner streaked slightly. Colt instantly knew this feeling, this rush of a psychedelic. He started to drift, but was cut off from a voice in his helmet comm. "Colt, listen, Colt." Colt grabbed his head with both hands to steady himself. "Colt, listen." He nodded. "Good. I need you to remove your med case from your belt." Colt lowered his hand across his face. A blurred tracer captured his station. Colt took a deep breath and found the med case, unclipped it, and brought it to his face slowly. "Good, Colt. Take the small vial and insert it into the chamber in your suit just above your node." In Colt's eyes, the case had 4 bubbling vials. Sizes difficult to decipher. He closed his eyes and opened them again, and this time he spotted it. Grabbed the smaller vial and locked it in the chamber. When he closed the chamber, a glass rushed into the suit, filling his face mask for a moment. Colt gagged a few times, and within a second, his mind cleared. "Great job, Colt. Time to come out now." Colt found the door, and when he opened it, he heard screaming. Just outside the door from the next room, Jill was in the corner of the room, screaming hysterically, clawing at some kind of invisible attacker. Tammy was sitting in a chair with Andy standing behind her, offering her some water. She was pale, with solid black pupils. Colt and Jewel went out into the main room where Master Trainer Sharp was. He walked up to Colt and extended his hand, saying, "That was impressive, Mr. Kramer. To be honest, I didn't think any of you would make it, but I like to be surprised. I'm very pleased to invite you into our group as the newest member in the Forbidden Grounds Squadron Guard." Colt shook his hand and smiled. Jewel gave him a wink. Colt flushed slightly, and she led him into the back. "Here you go. Official uniform of the Guard. Meet me at the shooting range in the morning. That's when the real training begins." Colt took the uniform, inspecting the symbol embossed into the sleeve. Colt had not felt good like this in a very long time. As he walked back to his room, he started to dwell on all the terrible things that had just happened in training. In the past, stopped short of consumption, and breathed a small victory for the night. The new uniform put a little pep in his walk to the shooting range the next morning. The afterglow quickly faded when he realized that Jewel was not kidding about the training. The training in Hell was not a boot camp to get new recruits rapidly training for duty. It was merely a litmus test to see if you could tolerate the grueling torture the Guard put themselves through every day. Chapter 3. After an additional 6 weeks of training, Colt was ready to hunt. Colt participated in the last day of new patrons trainings. It was focused on shooting techniques, signaling from the guards, and environmental awareness. Since the patrons' training only lasted 4 days, it had to be concise, engaging, and provide the appearance of control. Little did they know, each guard member had the power to turn off their guns and even immobilize their suits if it came to it. The team did everything that they could to embellish the show for the patrons because it was, mostly for them. The next morning, the team went out into the wilderness, trail mongoose. Andy gave the briefing just before the hunt. He showed the dashboard of the trail cameras, and it tailed 3 separate sightings of a pack of click, the bluish-purple six-legged creatures from the first surveillance video Colt viewed. Colt felt shivers race his veins, his heart fluttered, he felt a bead of sweat forming on his forehead. Jewel smiled at him, and they all went to suit up. Master Trainer Sharp was waiting outside with the group of patrons. He went down the line, personally checked each person's suit, gun, and spoke into the helmet comm. You all must remember your training. It is a hostile and forbidden place out there. Good hunting. The team departed into the wilderness, led by Jewel with Andy in the rear, Holt and Jerry's replacement Chad in the middle. The first hour was calm, not much activity except for a close encounter with a large herbivore that they startled, and it bucked at one of the patrons. As they traversed a small outcropping of jagged rocks, they made it to a small, fast-flowing creek. As they crossed, a proximity alarm wailed in the guard's comm. Jewel gave the freeze signal. They spread out and the team split into 2 groups. One team went over to cover the ridge ahead, while Jewel and Colt went further down a wide valley. Paul, the patron to Colt's left, raised his gun and said, "Look over there." Colt glanced over to catch a black shadow dip behind dense brush. Affirmative movement and brush ahead. Paul, I need you to pan out next to the large tree, Colt said in the comm. The second Paul made it to the tree, Colt turned to look at Jewel and the other patron. Colt instantly raised his gun and yelled in the comm, "Behind you!" Patron jerked his body around, raising his gun, and pulled the trigger. White flashes of light spewed from the nozzle, exploding the earth in front of him. Lost his footing and stumbled, but didn't let up on the trigger. The gun continued. One flash flew past Jewel's helmet. The next struck a tree. Bark and fiber sprayed Jewel's suit. Another round of gunshots rang behind Colt. Paul was letting loose multiple rounds. Colt spotted the 6-legged beast charging at the patron. He placed a single shot in the creature's head, stopping it stone cold. He turned back to Jewel, gun raised, kneeling behind the patron's back. "Take the shot," she yelled in the comm. The patron aimed, blasted the creature, and Colt watched as a mist of dark blood covered them. Colt scanned the area for more targets, but the ground was still. In the comms, Andy said, "Be alert, we still have active targets over here." A few moments later, they heard 3 gunshots crack the sky. When they regrouped, they had 3 confirmed kills. Colt's heart was still pounding. He looked at each patron, and they felt it too. Andy, Chad, and Jewel were like statues, the scene as normal as breathing. They called in the kills, and a cleanup crew met them on the trail. One of them high-fived Jewel and said in the guard-only comm, "Hell yeah, this means party tonight. Noob popped his cherry." She rolled her eyes but nodded in agreement. As they walked back to the grounds, the guards gave birth to the patron's ultimate story, as they were trained to plant the seeds of a larger-than-life event that the patrons will tell forever. Later that night, at the squadron guard members partied out in the shack. Colt could feel the bass of the music before he opened the door, hesitant that he might find another glance of Thumper going to town. The room was full of familiar faces, including Jewel, who walked over and handed him a beer. Andy also walked over, and they all cheered for the good hunt, successful hunt. Colt mingled around the room, talking deeper with some of the less familiar guard members. He quickly started to bond of more than just friends. This group was like family because you had to trust your life with them. Colt glanced over and watched Jewel go into the back room, a haze drifting from the door. Colt walked to the door and went inside. He could see a group of people on a couch to his left smoking a large pipe of some kind, but to his right, he watched a group of people in a circle, sitting on the floor around a familiar box, with hoses and rounded cones. He stumbled backwards, hitting his back on the door jamb, kept walking backwards, bumping into a small woman. In his mind, the room went silent. He turned and walked outside while the dark thoughts formed hooks of pain, visions of bleeding eyes and pink foaming mouths. Jewel burst through the door and went over to him. "Colt, what's wrong? Are you okay?" she said as she grabbed his shoulder. He looked in the eyes and started to cry, holding his hand over his mouth. "I'm so sorry, so sorry. I'm a monster. Just a drug addict piece of shit who killed my friends. My love. Me, a monster. I'm a monster. Master Trainer Sharp was right, you know. I'm here for a reason, because no one else wants me. I'm not even sure that I belong here either. You're not a monster, Colt. You did not kill your friends. You might have been a drug addict, but you're not a murderer. You must forgive yourself, no matter how difficult it might be." "Do you have any idea what you're saying, Jewel? It's too painful to wash it away." "I'm not saying wash it away. It'll never go away. Look, we're all here for a similar reason. I know this pain all too well. I was a drunk driver and decided that I could drive my baby sister and me home from a friend's house one night. I disengaged the autopilot because I thought that it would be fun, but instead crashed into a semi truck at 40 miles per hour. She was only 4 years old, and I did that, Colt. I killed my baby sister. Period. End of story. You can't wash that. You can't wash it away, but you can forgive yourself. You have to." Colt could feel her raw emotion. He knew that emotion all too well, like a wet cloth sticking to his skin. He was too stirred to continue partying, and Jewel knew it. She grabbed a couple beers from a cooler on the porch and said, "Let's just take a walk instead." The night ended with Colt experiencing a feeling of deja vu, a repeat of the moment when he glanced at Jewel's naked body during that first suit up, however, this time getting to follow through the dirty thoughts that raced into his mind. Colt continued to go on the hunts, hundreds of them, and he was good. In his second year, he had started to train new recruits, and he found it quite ironic how he had felt so fearful, so intimidated when Danny hit the floor with that stun gun, but now felt nothing. Danny did come back, but to work in sanitation. His face looked only a little melty. It was amazing that even after all of that, he was still the most cheerful person in the room. Holt thought that Master Trainer Sharp used him to scare the shit out of the new recruits. His cheerful demeanor was so bouncy that it more often seems to be unnerving. Chad and Colt were preparing the recruits for the Nikanor acid trip test when Andy slammed open the main door. Colt looked at him and said, "What are you doing here? You know we're about to start the big training." "Colt, I wanted to tell you this in person," Andy said while catching his breath. "What are you talking about, Andy?" "There was an incident an hour ago on the hunt," Andy said, eyes down. Colt grabbed Andy's shoulder with his suited hand. "What are you talking about, Andy?" "She's dead, Colt. Jewel is dead. They're all dead. The Nicanor killed them all." Colt let go of his shoulder, stared at the floor. His breath went heavy. "What trail, Andy? Where is she?" "Cleanup just got back from Trail Osage, but they're not letting anyone see. Apparently it's very bad." Colt walked right past Andy, picked up his helmet and his gun. Chad grabbed Colt's shoulder and said, "Don't do it, Colt. We train for this every day. You can't bring her back from the dead. Running out there will do nothing." Colt put his hand on Chad's shoulder. A tear flowed down his cheek and said, "I know that, Chad. I know." Then he sprinted out the door. He heard Andy and Chad follow, but they couldn't keep up. Master Trainer Sharp yelled into Colt's helmet comm, "Stand down, Colt, stand down." Colt did not even flinch. He just ran, faster than he had ever run in his whole life. He knew it was stupid. He knew he was wrong, but he didn't care. As he approached Zone 7, the bright light changed and his visor shifted to filter the new intensity. Colt ran a bit more, until he was forced to stop. A large cliff face in front of him. He breathed deep, panting. He knew the area very well and could spot the bloody mess instantly. It covered a large area, and a few pieces of soot were scattered about. Holt braced his gun and scanned around but found nothing. He walked for another half hour and sat down on a large rock. He just sat, blank faced with tears. Just as he filled his head with doubt, he heard a strange sound. It reminded him of a rattle. It had an organic beat to it. Holt looked around for the source of the sound but couldn't find it. The sound came again, and this time Colt found its origin. From around the cliff corner, a large stalking creature stood on two legs, its body black and glossy like latex. Its large triangular head snarled vicious teeth as it made the sound once more. Colt stumbled back and reached for his gun. Then a powerful wave hit him. The creature started to melt from reality. The psychotropics were much stronger than in training. The creature made the sound again, and Colt heard it for what it was: laughter. Colt scrambled to his feet, the creature lurching forward, his hands feeling like useless noodles. He ran. He pawed at the med pack on his arm, managing to free the tube from its holder. The creature was starting to run. Colt dropped the tube and fumbled to his knees to grab it. He turned his head at the Nikanor's image split into three terrifying beasts charging. He dropped the tube and ran. Colt was about to dart behind a tree when a black blur swiped across his vision. He felt his leg give and he was falling. All his training kicked in and he rotated mid-fall to land on his belly. Colt rotated to his back, scooting back against a tree, braced his gun to his shoulder and blasted at one of the creatures. He shifted back and forth. He charged once more, but Colt pulled the trigger, light streaking through the Nikanor's body. It fell in a heap of hissing guts that sizzled with contact of the scorching ground. Colt sighed, head spinning with confusion as he looked down at the ripped suit over his arm, nano node exposed, and that damn red light rapidly blinking beneath his skin was now vibrating. He grabbed the other med pack, lifted the tube, and injected the serum into his node, and instantly his mind went calm. It was only then that he looked down. His leg ripped in half just above the knee. It lay a few feet from his propped up body. Thick black liquid roping out, connecting one half to the other. The liquid pulsed as it slowly began to pull itself back together. Holt just stared, stupefied. He looked at the Nikanor's dead body and said, "I tried to tell her, and she almost had me convinced, but I'm the real monster." All right, there we go. That is Hissing Guts of the Nikanor.